The issue is, how do we structure society to fix that? And if the consensus is that we're going to use government to do it, okay, something that I don't really support, but if that's what we're going to do, then we had better come up with government programs that are actually going to achieve these results. The fact that people today are complaining, especially people on the left, they're complaining about trickle-up economics, when 20 years ago, people were complaining about trickle-down economics. Well, what do you bloody want? What you want is trickle sideways economics, where all middle class people are bloody singing kumbaya, working from home one day a bloody week for an hour in their jocks, and there's no rich people.
Edge Radio Australia, of course, time for the Greater Wealth. I've got Derek beside me, and look, we were discussing this off air, mate. Very excited. You've got the computer, so you're in charge, okay? And this is it. You're official looking. We have also discussed with fact that we've got a fantastic special guest, but he's not really a guest. He's part of the family these days, and quite frankly, we should just get him to move in. Shaquille, good to see you, my friend.
Thank you. I have been here a week, so I felt guilty I didn't come here last week.
And
so
you should feel guilty.
Okay.
I haven't seen him for a whole week. There you go. So,
been a quiet week for you then. Fair enough.
Actually, I didn't even talk to him. I actually didn't even return a couple of his calls. Oh, man, they're actually called, Derek.
Oh, look, you're like that relative at Christmas who won't talk to us. I appreciate that. Oh, now, speaking of the relatives we don't want to talk to, on the line, who have we got? Mr. Katz here, Travis.
Well,
all the way from Geraldton, mate.
Gents.
All right, what we're going to do here is jump straight into the show because, Derek, you've got some information that I think a lot of us have been talking about, honestly, but it's probably, I don't know, I'd rather go into more detail. So what are workers doing at the moment, mate?
Well, there's a bit of a tug-of-war going on. I don't know if you've ever played the whole tug-of-war for real. This is what's happening.
I was very good at it. Just saying.
Yeah.
I really was.
Yeah, there you go. I'll be on your side then because I wasn't that good at it. I would... It's interesting tug-of-war between the employers and the employees, and that is this. If anything good came out of COVID, it was working from home. That was one thing that a lot of people really, really enjoyed, and I think that a lot of the people who have gotten used to that don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to having to fight traffic.
Yep.
For an hour or longer in some situations, as it might be, or even take public transport.
Well, it's a cultural change. We got very used to it, didn't we?
But the employers are starting to say, hey, we want you back in the office.
Yep.
And made allowances for a couple of days here, a couple there. Now, there's two sides of this, I guess, in that some collaborative work, employers are saying, you know what, we get more done, get more productive in that situation. I can see that side of the argument. The other side of that is employers are saying, we like the trust factor that our employers actually allow us to do this.
Sure.
And we're more productive because we're happier. And there is some talk, which I think is really important to understand here. Some are saying, should there be at different pay levels for those who are working from home are paid less than those who are actually in the office? Some conjecture on that, which is a bit harsh if you're trying to... I think it should be rewarding our staff rather than punishing them.
Look, and I thoroughly agree. I think also, have we got any decent research into this, okay? I mean, I get a bit worried about the term, being peer-reviewed these days because I get, let's face it, some of the peers are quite questionable. But we've seen that a bit over the last 3 years particularly. But I mean, honestly, do we know what productivity levels are like? This is important. If we're going to talk about how people are paid, we should know if there's a raise in productivity rather or a drop. Yeah.
I think that... For me, I love working from home. I'm an advocate of it. Why? Because I get to work around. I'm not doing a 9 to 5 thing.
Sure.
I'm actually probably working longer than 9 to 5. The other thing that I really hated in the office when I used to do that is constantly getting interrupted. Right. You'd be in a situation, and because some of the stuff I have to do is quite creative, if you come and disrupt that flow, it's like, oh, am I going to lose that? It's like, hang on, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this punched out. Whereas I think from home, you can kind of lock yourself away sometimes and just bash it out without those phone calls coming in or people walking into your office going, hey, can you look at something I'm working on now?
Look, completely agree. This morning, I mean, literally, I get up, one of the first things I do every single day is I walk straight to the computer. I go straight in and start working pretty much. So as far as productivity. Yeah, I'm certainly not doing the 9 to 5 routine there. And I agree with you on the fact that you've got that time to actually focus on what you're doing. You don't have the interruptions, except for the cat. For some reason, the cat just loves walking on the laptop no matter what you do. But it's there's that to it. I look at it. I don't have the travel time. I don't have the sitting in the traffic, riling me up. Because let's face it, being stuck in.
Just so you guys know, we do have Kimberly Calhoun. I know you can't see the screen. So, Kimberly, welcome to Australia. Thank you for joining us. We are talking about working from home. Sorry to interrupt.
No, very much appreciated there. Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for joining us. Fantastic. What are your thoughts about working from home? The differences, obviously, over the last 3 years, things have changed a lot. No question about that. And a lot of us are working from home. I was very resistant to it. Really did. I really thought it was a terrible thing. But now I'm a convert. Not going to lie.
Yeah.
Really am. What's been your experience in that regard?
Oh, hi. Yeah. I've been doing this for as long as I can remember. I was an engineer in telecom many years ago. And one of the things that we designed was one of the first high bandwidth networks. And we installed it here in Research Triangle Park. And the idea was so more people could work from home. So I've always been a big advocate of it because I just felt like it saved a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of resources. So probably since 1989, I've been a big fan of working from home.
Since you're two or three, yeah. Cool.
Kimberly, let's just make it 1999 or 2009 so that you don't look, we'll take a few years off you, okay?
Thank you.
It's interesting.
Yeah, but I'm a big fan of working from home, but I also know that you have to develop a discipline for it.
So look, I'll make the comment. Obviously, I derive most of my income from trading the markets and other financial things that I do. And one of the attractions in my early life to becoming a trader and honing my skills in that was that I didn't have to work in an office. And if I have children, Dad's always home. Maybe Dad's busy sometimes on the computer or on the phone, but Dad's home. So that was one of the attractions I had. So I understand why people would want to do that. But and also there are some benefits for companies. So it means that you can actually put on more staff. For example, if you have staff working in a call center and they can work from home, you don't actually need to have as much office space.
Spot on.
So those sorts of things can be advantageous. Less traffic on the roads, all that sort of stuff.
And you're dealing with less immigration issues too. If you want to use staff that are overseas or different locations, you're not having to move them from where they live and into another.
So thank you for stealing my thunder on that one.
Sorry. You're I read your mind.
You guys
still in sync.
But the other thing, of course, is which I was a bit of an advocate for prior to COVID was the idea of being able to outsource some office jobs into rural areas because we know that rural areas are often struggling to get work. And just to use a call center for an example, then hey, we can have people working in these locations. But yes, with what you've just said, yes, you can then outsource things offshore. But of course, that means if you're in a job and you're working from home, you might want to be really careful about whether or not your employer might say, instead of me paying you $35 an hour plus superannuation and sick pay and blah, blah, I can employ somebody in the Philippines for, $5 an hour.
Well, that's been happening for a long time.
Exactly. And this could exacerbate that.
I agree.
But look, we do see a lot of outsourcing. I will just say this. I think that the idea that we have seen where some employees are saying, well, no, we're refusing to come back to the office. No. You don't dictate to your employer, right? And some employers, and I remember about 10 or 15 years ago, Yahoo went through this,
right,
where they had people working from home, and the CEO, I forget her name now, wanted the staff to come into the office more frequently, and they were like, oh, no, that's terrible. It's like, no, dude, you work here. You don't tell the boss what to do. The boss tells you. And so if the boss wants you in the office twice a week or whatever, then that's what you've got to do. Yeah, right. And for some roles, like I know when I'm working and I'm about to set up a company here in Perth, there are going to be people who are reasonably high up in management in that company who can work at home as much as they want, except for when I want them in the office. And when they're in the office, what Derek just said was annoying is somebody interrupting you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you all the bloody times. It's my company, and you're doing something, and I want you to do something else. Right?
Yep.
That's what's going to happen because I'm the one that's not just paying your wages. That's not the important bit. I'm the one who's taking on all the financial risk of that company. So if I want you to do something else, that's what you're going to do. And, unlike, Travis and his union mates over there, I happen to think that employees should be treated somewhat well, but I'm not here to make you happy. Right? I'm here to pay your wages, and you, on the other hand, are here to make me happy. That's what I pay you to do, not the other way around.
We've seen so much over the last couple of years, particularly, right? Where all this virtue signaling going on. I'll just forget the commie over there.
No, that's the Travis is, his friends that are doing all the virtue signaling, yes.
But the virtue signal. So, who are saying we're not coming to work we're going on strike until you do this, whether it's Disney or it's Netflix or whatever. I mean, come on, really, honestly, when. Look, I'm very much for the worker having a voice, no question about it. But
we don't want a voice. We voted against it, Aaron. Come on now.
Come on. Probably more now. But I think there's a level of that's important. But I tell you right now, the person who, exactly what you're saying, takes the risk on the business is the person who is entitled to run the agenda of that business, not the employee.
I don't want to go too far off the topic, but the problem with workers having a voice and these blasted unions that Travis loves so much.
Yes.
I did it 3 times in one show. It's brilliant.
To be sure.
But it's funny because Shaq's the one in a red shirt.
No, that's right. So is Kim, but I'll just remind you, this is the colour of the Republicans in America, the colour of the Labor here. But look, one of the things is that when they have a voice, it depends on what it is. I mean, if you like in the United States, where if you don't live in a right-to-work state, you can't have a job unless you're a member of the union. As the union says, you're striking. Yeah. Sort of bullshit's that in a free society. So what ends up happening is the workers will often force companies to pay them higher wages, and what those companies do is they don't employ as many people.
Yeah.
And I would just caution people against being too much of an advocate for working for home if the employer doesn't want them to, because if you force them to, then you show the employer that actually, maybe we should offshore those jobs. And also, please remember all those people that can't work from home. I mean, I don't want to go into a bar and have the bartender on Zoom saying, yeah, pour your own bloody drink, right, but I still have to pay full freight. I don't think so. No. I might as well stay home.
Well, you get that with some restaurants. Hey, come and eat our steak, and you have to cook it yourself. I'm going, I want that kind of money experience.
I have never understood this. The Gosnells Hotel used to do it when radio, was it 6IX? Used to broadcast from there.
Right.
And I remember going down there because I just wanted to check out the 6IX thing, and you paid like $80 for a steak and had to cook it yourself. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand.
Do this at home.
Yeah.
Come on.
Let's do this business model. Save a whole lot more money.
So bringing it back to the topic at hand, I have to say,
everybody. Go ahead, Travis.
I was going to say, this is probably one of the common times where I actually do agree with Shaq, but I think a lot of people aren't taking it into account also the mentality side of things. Because when you have to put a collared shirt on, going to work or dress nice, you're in that frame mindset that, wow, I just noticed the echo is actually really bad here, that you're at work, you're not at home, you're not sitting on the couch, you're not playing with the kids, you're business. And you've got that mindset, right, I'm here to work, I'm doing the things. Where working from home, it's really hard to get into that mindset.
That's true, but if you're a computer programmer or a graphic designer or a journalist or you're working in a call centre, what do you need to get dressed for? Just stay in your knickers, put a bloody shirt on and a collar and a tie in case you need to jump on a Zoom.
Yep.
Keep your Ugg boots on or whatever. And I mean, what do you need to get dressed up for?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even dress up when I am working, as it is now.
I have been a little taken back when I call somebody in a call center, right? I call for help or assistance, and I hear in the background kids playing, dogs barking, sirens going down the street, somebody yelling, neighbor, So I have to say it's strange for me not to hear a call center in the background or, just silence of some kind. It makes it difficult for me to communicate at that point. I tried to, and I know it's probably difficult for them with all the stuff going on too. So I think that there is a balance and a discipline that people need to get into, but they need to realize if you're working from home, you're working. You're not taking care of kids. You're not cleaning the house. You are working. You get your mind in that office where you're at. And I think that's what a lot of people lack in that skill set of being able to work from home.
Yeah,
on the other hand,
Shaq is special.
for those people, especially women, who, fortunately or unfortunately, often are looking after kids, things like that, and that prevents them from being able to work at all. By being able to work from home, they've got a little bit more flexibility, and it means that they can take some time off because they've got their 3-year-old has just hit the 1-year-old and they're crying in the background. They can take the 20 minutes away and then come back to the task that they were doing. So there's more flexibility, and I think that's just one example of a group that can benefit from it, which actually brings them into the workforce where they're otherwise cut out. So, look, as you said, there's a balancing act. There's a positive and a negative to this, and I think it's just a balancing act that happens. But I do like the idea of being able to bring people into the workforce.
I'm going to throw in an issue that we haven't covered, and that's privacy. Now, a lot of people are now working from home who work for government departments who have access to all your private information. To me, that's a little bit concerning when there's literally a laptop sitting there in someone's home. You're lacking that privacy. This is people's tax file numbers, their social services, all that kind of carry on. That's an issue. And with progressively more and more of those industries sort of working from home, you're finding there's a lot of your private information that's not very secure. But what are your thoughts on
it? We've just seen Optus get hacked.
Yep.
Was it Medibank, one of the health insurers?
Yeah. Got
hacked. I mean, what privacy?
Yeah,
unfortunately, what privacy?
I wish you were wrong, but you're absolutely spot on. Yeah, true. All right. Okay. Well, look, I think it's time we took a quick little break. It's Edge Radio Australia. And we're back, Edge Radio Australia. Now, what are we going to talk about now? We're going to jump into talking about probably the most successful investor in the world. He's certainly got the reputation for it.
You don't have to dedicate 15 minutes to me. That's okay.
No. Could we do? I was about to say, could we do you in 15 minutes? That's something I don't want to know.
That was a really poor choice of words. Could you do me in 15 minutes? That was really, really poor choice of words.
Yes, and cook dinner. Look, anyway, but all right, let's jump to Warren Buffett. Okay. What's going on there?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Berkshire Hathaway have reported their third quarter operating profit shot up 41% to $10.8 billion US. And of course, what's led the way is their insurance arm. That's the utilities, energy, and railroad business, they've had profit declines. So what this means is after tax operating earnings rose 42% to about $7,436 per Class A share, it's topped the consensus there. A record $157.24 billion in cash is sitting there in their accounts right now. $157.24 billion, up from $147.4 billion as of the 30th of June. Now, I look at this and I go, okay, it sounds like he's sold off quite a lot. They did do a buyback in their own company. That totaled about $7 billion. But in the same token, if they've sold off a lot and they're sitting in cash, you start to wonder, why is there so much cash sitting there? Is this an indication? I look at it going, do they suspect a market crash? Are they sitting on the sidelines and just going, right, let's let this happen and then go back in when it's all hit rock bottom? That's what I wonder as a trader. I'm looking at going, okay, interesting times ahead. Have you got any insight on this, Shaq, or thoughts on it?
Well, no insight, because obviously, I'm not privy to the decisions that Berkshire Hathaway make, but look, there could be a whole heap of reasons for it. It could be simply that he's trying to realise some losses in the equities markets to reduce taxes. It could be all sorts of things.
Okay.
A lot of that money is sitting in short-term treasuries. Maybe he thinks they're mispriced because of the yield curve inversion. We certainly know that. So yield curve inversion means that long-term interest rates are lower than short-term interest rates. Okay. So that means you're getting higher interest rates right now. Well, why are you going to tie your money up in long-term equities when you can get a really juicy return now in the short term? Okay. One of the things that happens is when the yield curve inverts, it is more often than not by a substantial amount, an indicator for recession. But a lot of people who don't really understand this, they just hear about it and they see the financial press say yield curve inverted. They start shorting the market, and the market keeps going up for quite a while.
Okay.
Thing is that the market doesn't normally go into a recession. The market doesn't normally fold really dramatically until the yield curve uninverts. So once the yield curve goes back to normal, then all of a sudden the market drops. So, he might be, look, he's a smart guy. He might be just trying to get the cash together for future opportunities. One thing that the Berkshire Hathaway has never done is pay a dividend, but he has had stock buybacks. So maybe he's trying to distribute some money. But the other thing is that in those relatively safe businesses like insurance, I think he's struggling to find businesses to buy. And that's going to put a bit of pressure on him, actually, because, he's going to end up with people saying, hey, what are you doing with that cash? Like, you need to do something with it. We need to get a return on our money. AIG, America Insurance Group, they had a situation where they were getting billions and billions and billions of dollars a week in premiums, and they were just struggling. And I can tell you, not that I've had that much, but when I've worked, for or consulted for institutional, banks and financial institutions, if you've got too much money coming in, you have an obligation to your clients and to the shareholders to place that money somewhere.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it becomes a nightmare because you've got risk metrics as well. So you can't just go and put the money anywhere, and you're trying to find places to place that money, and it can be difficult to do. And so, with 150 billion, 160 billion almost, which is, by the way, converted into Australian dollars. We're talking about, $250 billion just about.
Yeah.
So, that's a pretty reasonable sum of money.
Huge amount.
It's not easy to just get that placed. So he's going to have some issues, I think.
And you had money problems.
Yeah. Damn, I've got $250 billion. What am I going to do with it? I know that's what it sounds like to all of us, but within that corporate world, they can't. People go, just give it to me. Yeah, that's really funny.
Yeah.
But they actually have to do something with it.
Of course they do. And they've got shareholders to consider and all that sort of.
Yeah, and he can't pay a dividend. See, that's what would normally happen with a company.
That's what I was going to ask.
You just pay out a dividend, but Berkshire Hathaway has never paid a dividend.
Why?
Well, America is a bit different to how we view it here in Australia, by the way.
Okay.
So in Australia, we actually like those juicy dividends. I mean, Telstra used to pay 7-8%. I'm not sure what the dividend yield is now, but you used to get those juicy dividends. Whereas in America, it's a little bit different. You do have dividend-paying stocks over there, but the mentality is that if the board of directors has decided to pay out a dividend, what that is implying is that they think that they can't do anything productive with the money and they're going to give it to their shareholders. So therefore, maybe I shouldn't be investing with them because I don't know what to do with the money. Whereas we here in Australia and in other countries like Frontier, New Zealand, the UK, we're a bit more used to having those dividends. And of course, we all know about imputation credits and all this sort of stuff that, people hear about, it being quite an important part of what we do. Without boring everyone with the tax system, our tax system is more geared towards that than the US is. Right. So that's sort of the attitude. And so what he did was he took that to extremes and said, well, I'm never going to pay a dividend. And of course, to buy a share of Berkshire Hathaway, I'm not sure what the price is today, but it's probably, 150 grand or 200 grand for one share. Right. So, is that a good idea? Is it about it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I know absolutely nothing about this, but I just know from my point of view, obviously, a lot of people right now are talking about the fact that there looks like there's going to be a stock market crash, right? Okay, it's been talked about for a while now, okay? And we're probably talking about, first quarter next year is what people are leaning towards at the moment, I hear.
That's always the hardest thing is timing.
Spot on. Now, is this a case of cashing up? Exactly that. Two things: preparing yourself and protecting yourself when that crash happens, that you're not losing as much, and also being cashed up so that when that does happen, you can go in, buy up, and therefore be set long term.
Well, I think we can speculate that that's what he's trying to do, but it's only ever going to be speculation. But what I will say is, if you just try to put yourself in the mindset of a person running $1 trillion company, why would you right now take the risk in the equities market if you can put your money into the money market and get a nice juicy return?
Sure.
Right? Now, if I said that to you, or if I even said that to myself, I'm not going to take $1 million out of the equities market and drop it into a term deposit or some shit, because like there's no way that I'm happy with 8% on my money.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm running $1 trillion company, 8% is really juicy. So that's, I think, got a big part. I've got a lot to do with it.
Well, obviously, the larger amount, the more security you want, right?
Yeah. But the other thing that is worth noting is, I'm fascinated when people complain about high unemployment and the cost of living, because they're obviously not paying attention to what the central reserve banks of our countries have said, Australia, UK, US, pretty much all over the world. They have said that they are going to deliberately force the unemployment rate higher, that they're going to deliberately try to crush demand because they couldn't increase supply, so they're going to deliberately crush demand. Well, crushing demand means things like having a high unemployment rate, right? Yeah. And everyone's like, cost of living. Yeah, because that's, if you want the government to do something about cost of living, what are the options available to government? What can they do? Like the housing crisis, what do you want them to do? Release more land? Bullshit. You don't want them to release more land and reduce the upward pressure on housing. Everyone's complaining at the moment, centre-right political parties in Australia, like One Nation, Pauline Hanson brought this up on her One Nation cartoons. Sure. The Liberal Party's talked about this. Look at what the Labor Party's done. They've introduced an extra 500,000 immigrants into Australia right when we have, a critical shortage in the housing market. Yep. Yeah, well, most Australians own their own house. This is fantastic for most people. Okay.
But is it? Because you're moving sideways, not upwards.
Absolutely it is, because you've got upward buying pressure on properties. The last thing you want to do, if you own property, the last thing you want to do is to have the government intervene in that market in order to reduce the price of housing. However, if you're 25 or these days 35, trying to buy your first home because you found a girl and you want to get married and have some kids, so you've got Buckley's chance of getting into your own home. So there's a massive disconnect between what some people in society want versus the other. So the reason I say all that is, with the market being relatively overheated, or certainly having gone up really substantially, right? We've seen the GDP of the United States. People talk about how great Trump was, and we can argue about whether he was good or bad. I personally think he was great. But Joe Biden, for all the criticism he gets from the right, the GDP of the United States went from 21 trillion to 27 trillion. It's 35% that's increased over the last couple of years. Okay. That's a big increase. So if you now need to pull money out of the markets, and you now need to, lower the cost of living, a really good way of lowering the cost of living is to have the market crash. And just to prove that point, I'll end with this. When people complain about things like the Great Recession, or if you have a look back at the Great Depression, because I wasn't alive then, but I know you were, if you have a look at cost of living was fantastic during the Great Recession, wasn't it? Real estate prices were cheap. Going to restaurants were cheap. Trying to book a hotel. You could book a hotel room in Vegas at a 5-star resort for like $40 a night. Yeah. It was fantastic. Cost of living came down. So what do you want government to do? So if you want cost of living to come down, the government's going to do that for you in the way that you are going to absolutely hate, but they're going to give you what they want, what you said you wanted.
Ripping the Band-Aid off, so to speak. I don't know.
Well, it's not so much ripping the Band-Aids. You said you wanted a new car, right? So your missus goes and smashes your old one. That's not quite what you meant, but that's what you get, right?
Okay. But here's a big, without wanting to sound like a communist here by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, you're good mates with good mates with the union mates, so you might as well start.
I'm surrounded by red right now.
Yeah.
No.
Here we go.
But here's the problem though, the ethical side of things, when everyday Aussies can't afford to live, when you've got rents for a 4-bedroom house at $700 a week, when you've got which is equating to such a massive percentage of their weekly pay, what you're doing is you're damaging in Australia's case, middle Australia is being smashed, and I think this is happening in America as well, to look after the top end of town.
No, hang on. Them's fine words. You've definitely been hanging out with these union guys too long. They're not. But the middle class is not being smashed in order to look after the top end of town. Right. Okay. But whenever we have government come in and intervene in the market, like we just saw with Dame Ardern over in New Zealand, right? They come up with stupid ideas that no economist will approve, but sounds good to the idiots that are going to vote that way.
There lies the whole problem.
Then they get a bad result, and then they go, "Oh, Shaquille, you earned so much money out of that." No, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I'm the one I'm the rich guy who says you should have less government.
You're taking advantage of the situation.
I'm not taking advantage of any situation. I'm trading. Look, I don't care what government does. I'm going to make money.
But I don't say that in a negative way. No. Because in business, you should take advantage of every situation.
No, I don't think you should.
No,
I, for example, won't try to make money out of getting a government contract because I don't believe in it. I just don't. Right. But the bottom line is that the idea that middle Australia or middle America is being squeezed for the sole purposes of looking after the high end of town just isn't true. And look at what the Labor Party just did here in Australia. They've talked about they're going to have a moderate increase on superannuation. When they say moderate, they're going to double it from 15% to 30% if you're over $3 million, which with the rate of inflation, most people's superannuation is going to be at $3 million in the next 10 to 15 years. So that's their moderate increase.
Yep.
Second, they're going to put increased taxes on investment properties, both for foreigners and people locally. Now, if you think that's a good idea, because that was a program that's designed to help with the property market.
Sure.
How's that working in Victoria? It's become an absolute nightmare because of all of these programs that were designed to help the everyday Australian.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't think they're being squeezed in order to help the top end of town. They're being squeezed because they're asking the government to intervene in the market that they should intervene in.
Well, I think ultimately the government intervened too much, quite frankly, and there lies the biggest problem. And if you look at Australia, you look at America, you look at all these different countries, the reality is that we need rather far less government than more.
Of course we do. And if you are going to
that's not the way it's going.
If you are going to intervene in the market, at least do something which is sensible. But we always hear all this stuff that people believe, and it's true, but it's ridiculous. So Nick Pallavito, who's part of Pod TV, one of the founders, along with Kim, always talks about how when Trump was around, the everyday American didn't have $400. Now inflation's around 70% of Americans don't have $1,000. So I asked the question, all right, what do you want to do about that? Redistribute wealth? Okay, cool. But if you redistribute wealth, and you just got to listen to the logic of what people say, if you give these people the money, they're going to go and spend it. Well, if they're going to go and spend it, it's going to mean that they don't have $1,000 anymore. So if your primary concern is that the average person doesn't have $1,000, and you want government to fix that by giving them $1,000, next week they're not going to have the $1,000 anymore, then what you need to do is you need to have government say, I'm going to give you $1,000 and you can't spend it.
Yeah, okay.
Does anybody want that?
No.
Okay. So stop blaming the wealthy because we are.
I'm not blaming the wealthy.
I'm going to knock on this door.
Okay, now we've had the Shaq out. Let's bring Kim into this. So
because you brought Nick into this with one of my favorite sayings about the top 1% has it all, and the middle class can't even scrape together $1,000 for an emergency, and that's pretty much the truth right now. But what you're trying to do when you're adjusting all of this is you want to start generating cash flow, and by generating cash flow, you'll reestablish the economic situation and downturn. But right now, what we have instead of a trickle down economics, we have a river up. Everything's going up, and everything's going into the rich people's pockets. I don't know about Australia, but I think our biggest problem occurred during COVID when they issued those PPP loans for millions and millions and millions of dollars with terms and conditions that were never exercised at all, and then forgiven. They don't have to pay it back.
Really?
So millionaires who didn't even need it, and I know many of them who got it and didn't even need it, got millions of dollars. Now you've got a situation where all the money went up and the middle class takes the heat. Middle class is getting stretched thin. We work hard. We try to spend our money. We try to save our money. We try to eventually get one step up to where maybe we can retire early, but it's being stretched very thin, and you're going to snap it, and these people are going to go under. And when they do, I guess, you upper class top 1% will have all the money, but who's going to do the work for you? Nobody.
Okay, so I know you.
People at
No,
home.
I know, but I know that you love to say that, Kimberly. But here's the thing: to be a top 1% income earner in Australia, a lot lower than what people think.
Okay.
It's 350 grand a year. Okay. That's not an insurmountable or unimaginable amount of money. There's people that work up in the mines that earn that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
It could be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer that earns 350 grand a year. In the US, last time I checked, it was around the 500-600 grand mark.
Right.
Okay, to be a top 1%er. Well, here's the thing. What are we talking about? If you bought a house if you bought a house in the 80s and you're selling it now, and you've made a $2 million capital gain,
Yep.
but because it's your primary home, you don't have to pay tax on it.
Yes.
Then they report that as, for that year, you were in that top 1% and you didn't pay any tax. Look at how unfair the system is. See, the way the data is presented just in such a way that it distorts reality.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, Kim, I totally get where you're coming from. I wasn't born wealthy. There have been years I've lost lots of money. There's been years I've earned lots of money. You know, I certainly didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. It's not like I don't have any compassion for the hardships that people in my own family go through in the middle class. But that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is not that wealthy people are disproportionately earning money or owning assets, and that you know, people who are in the middle, we won't even talk about the poor, the middle class is being squeezed. The issue is, how do we structure society to fix that? And if the consensus is that we're going to use government to do it, okay, something that I don't really support, but if that's what we're going to do, then we had better come up with government programs that are actually going to achieve these results. The fact that people today are complaining, especially people on the left, they're complaining about trickle-up economics, when 20 years ago, people were complaining about trickle-down economics. Well, what do you bloody want? What you want is trickle-sideways economics, where all middle-class people are bloody singing kumbaya, working from home one day a bloody week for an hour in their jocks, and there's no rich people. It's just not going to happen.
You and I can hear.
I got to get in on this one. I got to get in. Hang on, shush. Sorry. No. So the biggest thing is, like, Kim's talking trickle up, Shaq's talking about the upper end getting screwed over. The biggest difference, a lot of people are failing to come back down to the bare foundations of it. The reason the rich are getting a lot more percentage of what the money's going either way is because they understand the rules and regulations which is in the system, what's going on. The people in the middle class are too busy just working to make a living, and they're getting screwed over due to their lack of knowledge. If they knew how the financial system worked, if they knew how the political system would work, they could quite easily get themselves out of this shithole. So I don't think the government is going to do what the government does. They've been doing it for centuries. They're always going to screw someone over, whether it's the upper class, lower class, or middle class. The trick is, if you want to get out of your current situation, you need to get yourself educated, and you've got to understand the rules in which the system you are in. So Shaq learned the system. He got himself from middle class, lower class into the so-called 1%. So Shaq has gone and done something amazing. I'm the same. I was born welfare mother, domestic violence, drug addictions, the whole works. You throw it out there, I probably had some sort of involvement in it.
And now we're going to jump into something else.
I've got to. No, I've just got to respond to something Travis has said, because all you lefties that are here, right, except for Derek, is a conservative, which is maybe worse.
Just throwing labels around. You're a commie. Today you're a commie. You're a conservative.
Well, that's right.
What do I want to be today? Well, that's right. What do you want to be today? What label do you want to wear?
As a man who suffers from white privilege without being white, right, who's managed to somehow succeed in this racist country by going to other racist countries with white patriarchy around, can I just say that if you actually look at the top 1%, the top 10%, by the way, do you know what it takes to be a top 10% income earner in Australia? 120 grand a year.
In the top, what, 10?
Top 10%, 120 grand a year.
Okay.
So when we talk about these people being richer, right, these people don't, it's not like there's this one group of people, right? See those 10 people over there, they're the super rich. and they got richer. No. People move in and out of this category, and they are wealthier. But that's those people. They could have been middle class, and they just became richer. So this idea that the rich are just hoarding all the money and all this sort of stuff, no, that's not what's happening. We look at the Forbes list. Everybody on it, almost everybody on it, is within 3 generations of the people that made the wealth. Okay. And if they're 3 generations ago, they're much lower on that list. The people at the top of that list are all self-made. So this nonsense of these people, they're just hoarding all the money. No, get off it. Get some ambition. Stop whinging.
Well, I know someone who hasn't been hoarding the money, okay? And in fact, I think he's actually completely fried, to be honest. Boom, boom. Come on. He was a bank man. Sam, let's talk about him.
It's ironic, isn't it? Sam Bankman-Fried has been found guilty in all 7 criminal fraud counts as of last week, facing a maximum sentence of 115 years in prison. And a lot of the prosecution's key witnesses came from former members of his inner circle, which was really, really interesting.
Very much so.
One of them was the ex-girlfriend. The other was business people who worked with him. What's interesting is now they're kind of looking at whether they're going to go to the second trial with him, whether to do that or not.
Now, what would be gained out of the second trial?
Well, look, I mean, that's the point. I mean, 115 years in prison time, will he serve all of that? That's always debatable. I guess it depends on. It's making a bit of an example of him in some regard.
Sure,
they don't want this to happen in the crypto industry again. Some are heralding this as a sign of look. The crypto market has now reached maturity, particularly when you look at the SEC ruling when it has come to different houses like Ripple, crypto coins, and also the application to make Bitcoin a ETF, or exchange traded fund.
Sure.
By BlackRock, no less.
No, I know. I can't get over that.
So, after years of how many of these financial experts have been bagging it out, you wonder how many of them behind the scenes have been acquiring it.
Yeah. Well, to use your term, mate, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. It's out there.
You remember Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, said 10 years ago that if any of his traders, if he found that anybody who worked for him in the trade desk owned Bitcoin, they'd be sacked immediately. Now they are one of the largest owners, I believe, of Bitcoin.
There you go.
There you go. So it's kind of a heralding. The Wild West days over of crypto. I don't quite think so. Okay. However, with the huge interest that it has been on CBDCs with central banks, they've realised, the bankers, that they haven't innovated for how many decades. They've had the Kodak model of let's not interrupt the system because it was so good.
So well for Kodak.
Meanwhile, technology has caught up and said, well, we can do it without you if we want to.
Yeah,
so it's a really interesting case here and a bit of a pivotal time as far as where crypto goes from here.
Yeah, no, my idea on the crypto space is I see it as a great alternative to get away from fiat and the control of it. But now, of course, now the two are being crossed over, it concerns me almost a little bit. A lot of people have made a great deal of wealth. I think that by making him a pariah, I guess, and don't get me wrong, he's a horrible human being, clearly, with what he's done. I'm certainly not on his side. But are they using it to demonise crypto?
No, I don't think so. I think when you can move money off from one company to another, like he did offshore, something's got to step in. And I think the crypto space has worked to a large extent unregulated because government hasn't had a chance to catch up with the technology. It's kind of one trying to define what is the technology and how this is such an interrupter to the system. How do we now legislate this so that we, one, protect the consumer, but also have an even playing field where fair trades are done in the marketplace? And it just doesn't. Technology is always outpacing government regulation. So I think government's still scrambling to catch up on this.
I don't think they should catch up at all. First of all, he's a horrible individual. Well, come on. Look.
I think he's.
Okay, he ripped some people off, but granted that. This kid, in his 20s, right, manages to get hold of billions of dollars. Okay. They're going to be making movies about this guy. I think Wolf of Wall Street was good. This kid goes out, he's screwing every chick that works there because he has this polyamorous relationship thing going on. Right? He is in this mega apartment, this penthouse apartment in the Bahamas. He's, he's giving money to politicians, disproportionate to the Democrats. He's hanging out with high-ranking politicians, presidents, etc. And this kid was in his 20s. This kid was living the dream. Come on. most 20-year-olds, most young men grow up thinking, if I can screw anything in a skirt, I have billions of dollars, live with this, but most people would sign up for it. Now, should he do 115 years? Probably. Will he do 115 years? He might not do 115, but he's probably never getting out. And to punish a young guy for as long as that, I'm not sure. But Elizabeth Holmes pulled a couple $1 billion scam. Yep. You know, do we want to punish him for as long as that? I don't know. Maybe he should have some redemption somewhere along the line. But the thing is, it's a federal charge.
Sure.
Federal charge in the US normally will run concurrently. Okay. So they'll be stacked one after another.
Right.
He gets a few enhancements, one of which is the fact that it was a complicated scheme. There was more than 25 victims. The money was transferred overseas, things like that. So there'll be enhancements there. He's probably not coming out, or if he is, he's going to be so old that you know his life is over. I'm not sure that that's proportionate to for a financial crime. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know it's a lot of money, but you know, if you wave that sort of money in front of somebody, it's very easy for them to get out of control. And you actually have seen this with people that have earned really significant sums of money. All of a sudden, there's an unreality and they just make some bad decisions. Yeah. So is he a bad guy or did he just get carried away? I would say he probably just got carried away.
I think there's a lot in what you've just said, actually. I mean, look, okay, even on a smaller scale, much smaller scale, you look at what's happened to people who win lotto, all right, when they're not accustomed to having money and all of a sudden this big influx of cash comes into life, and how many poor decisions they make, how many ethical, very dicey decisions they make. Look, I can get it. I mean, he has hurt a lot of people. I think that he should be in jail for a long time. Do I think it should be that long? No, I actually don't. I think he should be able to be out in his 60s. That's what I honestly think. I think he deserves a little life at the end.
Well, yeah, in his 60s, you know, if this was Australia, for him to get in his 60s would mean that he would do longer than what we would do in Australia for murdering somebody.
Oh, you get 7 years for murder in Australia.
Exactly.
So,
no, but even the most egregious crimes that we've seen in this country have only been 25, 30 years, right? So we're talking about him doing more than murder. I'm not sure. Let me just say though, I believe the government. I've been saying this for a long time with cryptos. I believe the government was just waiting. They've been waiting with bated breath for something like this to happen, because the whole idea behind crypto was it was decentralized, etc., etc. Now the government's going to come in, and what are they going to do? You know, like the middle class are going to look after you with the cost of living and all the rest of it. The government's going to come in to protect you. And as Ronald Reagan said, those are the scariest words. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. So that's what they're going to do. And then they realise the whole thing with the CBDCs. I know we had one of our viewers that just wrote in about, you know, the social credit system and government being able to try. I don't think government will do that, because look at the Misinformation Act in Australia, right? Something they tried in the US, they tried it everywhere else. They know that they cannot, because of our constitutional rights in this country, they know that they cannot infringe on our freedom of speech that way. So they're going to require Facebook and Twitter and everyone else to do it on their behalf. Right? Now I hope
what the American model. Let's face it.
Absolutely, and I hope that Australians revolt. They won't, because Australians will just take it. But I hope that they revolt over it, as they should have done with the metadata rules that Senator Conroy tried to bring in.
Banking sector too.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we're going to see. We're already seeing people like Nigel Farage not being able to have a bank account in the UK. It's only going to be a matter of time before they sit there and say, look, you've been a bad boy and you can't go and buy groceries until you're a good boy.
Yep.
Or, you know what, you've bought too much petrol, we want 15-minute cities, etc. And in order to do that, they've taken this technology which was supposed to decentralize currency, and the government's now going to regulate that, centralize it, and they have all this control. And I'm just going to say this. Why exactly was the government allowed in the first place, if we just talk about the US, to mint their own currency and make it fiat currency, right, and force everyone to use it? See, back before they did that, every bank in the United States, or many banks in the United States, issued their own currency. Yeah. Okay. Now, why can't there be private mints? Because, you know, they would try to make sure that their currency is worth what they say it's worth, all that sort of stuff. There'd be competition in that market.
Sure.
Cryptos were kind of doing that in a digital way, and now government's in there to protect you. As far as I'm concerned, if I take this hairbrush that I took from Emirates, and you're prepared to accept that as value, so I can buy your hat off you, right?
Shaq,
why does government need to come in and regulate that?
Because Shaq, a comb's no value to me.
Well, just in case you wanted it as a memento to frame or something. Yeah. But why does government need to get involved in that? And that's effectively what's happening here. is if I've convinced a whole heap of people to give me $1,000 for each one of these combs, okay, and then the comb is not worth that when they try to redeem it. Well, do you want to be able to make your own shitty decisions, or do you want to have government to come in and say, well, look, that's a shit decision, don't do it?
Well, when people make shit decisions, they want to look at government and say, why didn't you save me? Why didn't you save me? But when you make great decisions, you want government the hell out of your life.
Exactly. And this is one of the things where, for example, if you try to do a foreign transfer of funds, a big complaint people have is it might take 2 or 3 days to get there. Even to close countries like the United States, very close to us, it'll take a couple of days before they get it in the US. They'll go, whoa, look at the crypto space. In crypto, it goes through straight away. Yes, but one of the reasons why it's slow is because the bank holds your money, and people go, yeah, well, they just put it in the money market because they're trying to make money out of my money. How much money they're making? They're making bugger all out of that. Okay, but the government has actually put safeguards in place. Sometimes the banks will review transactions and ring you and say, is this a legitimate transaction? You're 80 years old. Did you really mean to send this $150,000 over to India?
Sure.
Right, or whatever. So that was designed for governments to try to protect you. That's why they slowed down the speed in which transactions were conducted. That's why you have OzCo in Australia, but you don't have it internationally. So again, what do people want? Do you want to be protected?
Yep.
Or do you want freedom? Or do you want to try to get a balance in between? But unfortunately, in the attempt to be safer, government is getting involved in things that we didn't want them involved in. We didn't want them involved in the internet, now they are. We didn't want them involved in crypto, now they are. We don't want them involved in our lives, but they are becoming more and more involved in our lives every day.
What
I wanted to bring up the Sam situation of the 115 years. Odds are he's not going to really get it. They have to truly prove that he intentionally knew what he was doing and possibly working with someone else to defraud. But I mean, and there's a lot of legalities that will go into that. But I always reflect on whenever they go after someone like this and they want to make an example of them. I reflect back on Martha Stewart, who probably came out of prison wealthier than when she went in. But I think that Shaq is dead on when he said he just got caught up in the excitement. It's all, a lot of new, being first out there with a lot of technology. And I don't think he, in the beginning, had intentions of defrauding anybody. I think he just got caught up in everything that was going on. And it probably felt good to be at the top of his game. But I think there must have been a time in there that he had to have said to himself, this isn't right. And that's when he needs to cut that off. But our system's supposed to be a reform system. And I think putting somebody with his brain and ability to do what he did in prison for 115 years is wrong. I think what we need to do is take that and work with it. And make him pay it back to society if they felt like that he defrauded people. Make him work and pay it back. You're not going to you spend $100,000 a year keeping him in prison. He could probably turn around, and if you train him to be ethical or whatever you want him to be, he could probably turn that into 100 million to $1 billion. Right? And people back.
Kimberly, I don't think he's quite that talented, but let me just say this.
I think he is.
In 2007-8, Great Recession, we saw the Fed and the Treasury, the government, or to talk about your country, the rest of the world had the same issue, but just talk about your country, come in and bail the banks out and the insurance companies out.
Right.
When they had entered into these extremely complex derivatives that they knew nothing about, they blew up the economy. And it sent people, it's not just about the 30% of homes that people lost and the homelessness. Families got torn apart. Financial stress means people get divorced. The suicide rate went up. The rates of self-harm went up. Child abuse rates went up because people were so stressed and so devastated. And we never saw the government step in to try to help any of them. And yet they bailed out all the bankers. And all of those, and other trading houses, right, and who benefited enormously. In the first year after they gave the $700 billion TARP payments to the banks, they paid all of that money out in bonuses. And then, by the way, to be fair to the banks, they did pay it all back, but to also be fair to the homeowners who took significant losses on their homes. Most of them, or as a group, they paid all the money back to the banks too, right? They paid off their loans eventually. So, you know, when we're talking about this kid, you know, is screwing around with 20 billion or 30 billion, whatever it is, you know, if he was a trader at JP Morgan, or I'm not trying to pick on JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, but you know, the big banks, the ones that are too big to fail, would he be doing 20 years or 100 years or no? Like nothing would have happened, and that's the thing. He's being. I'm not trying to stand up for him because look, he had a good time. You're gonna have to pay the piper at some point for it, but you know, it's easy to go after him. It was a lot easier to go after him, but if he was a bank or something, like, you know what I mean? I think it's unfair. Yeah.
I do too. And I think that they need to, I think they could still put him to work. It's going to cost us money to keep him in prison. This is what I try to explain to people. He didn't commit a crime that justifies being in prison that long to begin with. And we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and we waste that space when we could have a real criminal, you know, dangerous criminal in prison instead of him. So I agree with you too. I don't think they would have bailed out the banks. They bailed out the banks many times, making a lot of mistakes that they should have gone to prison for. Some of the stuff that you're talking about that happened in 2008, I remember my sister, she works in the mortgage industry, and she told me, she said this new system that they're trying to push on people is going to cause everyone to go bankrupt in a couple of years because they came out with this interest-only program. So it made it look like people didn't have to pay as much. But what they didn't thoroughly explain to people very well was, you know, at the end of a certain period, you had to pay it all off. And people weren't prepared for that. They were not prepared for that. They took the money, they took their savings, they went out and spent it crazily, you know, on things that they probably shouldn't have. They had a lot of fun, they partied, maybe they need to pay the piper, but a lot of them went and their homes got foreclosed on because of the way those loans were set up. And I remember her telling me this whole system is going to cause so many people to go bankrupt, and it did.
But yeah, but you know something, Kimberly, even with the overheating of the real estate market during that time, that still would not have been enough to cause the calamity that occurred. The calamity was really caused because of a deterioration in credit quality, which meant that banks were not prepared to loan money to each other in the repo market. Now, who really is to blame for that, though? It's not the banks. I don't think it's fair at all. Look, it's the bank's fault and the insurance company's fault for the derivatives trading, absolutely. But this originally started because of government, because the Republicans didn't want to be the meanies that, you know, the Democrats always accuse them of being, right? We're so horrible only looking after the rich. So what did they do? They said to the banks, we want home ownership. We want the American dream to be available to every American. We want, George Bush, we want every American to own their own home, just like they're saying here in Australia. Yeah. And so they changed the regulations and said to the banks, give out loans to everybody, and look at what happened. So again, I know I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, but for all of you people that are sitting there going, oh, cost of living, the government's got to do something. Yeah, whatever the government does for you, I promise you, whatever the government does for you is going to be worse for you. I promise. It's like having a bad girlfriend. You're better off being single, right? You don't want government to do anything for you.
And on that bombshell, what we might do.
Let's talk about that.
Do I have a government complex? Maybe.
Just slightly, but never mind. All right.
Just one last comment. Aaron. Just last thing with the Freeman. I think the government will go after him because these are like the first cases that have never happened before, and I've got my daughter here pulling faces in the background. I personally think they are going to try him because this is the first time any of these cases have ever been done, and so they don't do it to set a precedence for future cases. So again, government interfering. So I'm
going to close the show out, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm going to use it. Well, I'm going to use him right here, the gentleman with the computer, the official one. All right, Derek, what are your final thoughts, my friend?
Don't let money possess you. You possess money.
Ooh,
I think that's the lesson that we've got to learn from that, or wealth, or whatever it might be, because it's not a kind master. and it can drive people to do some crazy stuff. And this is not the first time I've seen, money possess people and do some crazy illegal stuff. And it's a dangerous master. So don't serve it, let it serve you.
Like that. All right, with that, we'll wrap up the show. Thank you all for being part of it. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we do have another show coming up later on today, which we'll talk about when the time is right. But for the time being, thank you very, very much for being here. It's Edge Radio Australia, the greater wealth.